I never thought it would come to this. For years, Greg and I had been married 15 years, to be exact. We had a nice house, a decent life, a couple of kids, and a dog we both adored. Things weren't perfect, but whose life is? We had our disagreements, our little arguments, but I never expected that one day, after a fight, he would look me in the eyes and say the words that changed everything. You need to leave Sarah now. He didn't even raise his voice. It was cold, almost calm, but it hit me like a slap to the face. In that moment, it didn't matter that we had been together for over a decade. It didn't matter that we shared a home, or that I had supported his career when no one else would. None of it mattered. What mattered was that I was no longer welcome. At first I thought maybe it was just a fight, a moment of anger. I didn't believe he would actually make me leave. But Greg wasn't the kind of man who backed down from anything, least of all his own pride. I stood there in our living room, heart racing, trying to process what was happening as he packed a bag, throwing my clothes into it like they were nothing. You've got an hour. Leave. His voice was flat now, the heat from his anger fading, replaced by something worse, detachment. I didn't argue. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat, and something inside me snapped. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my purse, and then, his wallet. I didn't take everything, just the cards. But I knew somehow I'd made my first move. The house keys went into my pocket, my fingers gripping them tightly. I didn't want to make a scene, but I couldn't just leave empty. Not after everything. I took a deep breath as I stood in the doorway, looking back at him. He was too busy packing up his things, not even glancing in my direction. That's when it hit me. I was invisible to him now. Nothing more than a nuisance he wanted gone. But I wasn't gone yet. Not by a long shot. Greg didn't know it, but that moment, as I walked out of that house, was the beginning of a much bigger plan. The next few days were a blur. I moved into a small apartment I could barely afford, using the first of the stolen cards to pay for a deposit and a month's rent. I felt a strange mix of fear and adrenaline, fear of what was coming, but adrenaline because for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Greg didn't even try to contact me. At first, I expected him to beg me to come back, to apologize, but there was nothing. No call, no text, no word. I wasn't surprised, though. I'd known for years that I was never really important to him. He'd always been about his work, his hobbies, and his friends. I spent those first few nights in my new place, trying to collect myself. I took long walks through the city, visited coffee shops, and sat in parks, just to clear my mind. And while I did, I started to come to terms with the fact that I had a new opportunity on my hands. One I wasn't going to waste. Greg had taken so much from me over the years, but now, I had something. He wanted control over the money. That's when it all clicked. I'd been trapped for so long, unable to make my own decisions. Everything had to go through him. He handled all the finances, all the big decisions. I'd been the dutiful wife, the mother, the caretaker, but now, with the bank cards, I could take that power back. The cards themselves weren't a huge fortune, but they were enough for me to start building something again. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to thrive. The first few weeks were the hardest. I kept to myself, spending my days in the small apartment, barely speaking to anyone. My old friends, most of them had sided with Greg over the years, and I didn't feel like dealing with their pity. I had no real family to lean on either, just a few distant cousins who had their own lives. But then, something unexpected happened. One day, while grocery shopping, I ran into an old colleague of Greg's, Sarah Whitman. She was a lawyer, sharp as a tack, and I'd always admired her professionalism. She stopped me in the aisle, smiling. "Sarah, I didn't know you were in town. I heard about what happened with Greg. I'm so sorry, I really am. You don't deserve that." It took everything in me not to break down. She was one of the few people who had ever truly cared about me beyond what Greg wanted or needed. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It's been a lot to deal with." She nodded. "I can imagine. If you need any help, I'm here for you. We should grab coffee sometime, catch up." I hesitated for a moment. There was a part of me that wanted to tell her everything, how Greg had treated me, how he had tossed me out like nothing, but I held back. This wasn't the time. "I'd like that," I said, giving her a faint smile. And just like that, things began to shift. I started to see that I wasn't entirely alone. I spent the next few days thinking about Sarah's offer, but I also knew I had to focus on something bigger. Greg wasn't going to let me go. I had no idea what he was planning, but I could feel the tension building. I knew I had to act fast, while I still had control. The bank cards were my weapon now, but I was careful. I wasn't going to blow through his money without a plan. I sat down with my laptop, pulling up his bank statements online. I didn't know much about managing money, but I knew enough to figure out where things stood. The first thing that struck me was the house. The mortgage payments had been suspended for the past 3 months. If Greg had been hiding something financial problems, perhaps this was my chance to get ahead of him. The next day, I made a call to the bank, pretending to be Greg. I used his information to get access to his account details. Checking the balance, it wasn't much, but it was enough to cause a rift between Greg and his beloved investments. I could feel the pieces starting to fall into place. In Ohio, Greg's silence became more than just absence. It became a threat I could no longer ignore. I didn't hear from Greg in those first weeks, and at first, it was a relief. I didn't have to listen to his excuses or his condescending remarks about what I should have done. But the longer the silence stretched, the more unsettling it became. It felt like the calm before the storm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Greg was plotting something in the background. He wasn't just going to let me walk away unscathed. I knew him too well. Greg liked control. He liked things in his hands, where he could manage them. The thought of me taking his bank cards, his money, his power, well, that wasn't something he would stand for. But I wasn't going to make the mistake of underestimating him. I had been the one who was complacent for so long, letting him lead our lives while I stood in the background. No more. I had a plan now, and every move I made would be one step closer to taking back what was rightfully mine. The first thing I did was contact a private investigator. Her name was Lisa, and she came highly recommended. I found her through a friend of a friend, someone who knew someone who'd been in a similar situation. It wasn't cheap, but I knew it was necessary. Lisa's job was simple: find out everything Greg had been doing behind my back, track his movements, and uncover any secrets he'd been hiding. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about something deeper. Greg thought he could throw me away like trash, and I needed to show him that he wasn't the only one who could play the game of power. The first meeting with Lisa was brief but informative. We met at a cafe, and she was sharp, with short-cropped blonde hair and eyes that missed nothing. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her voice low but confident. "I need to know everything about Greg's financials," I said, my fingers tapping nervously on my coffee cup. "Where he's been spending money, who he's been talking to. If he's hiding something, I need to know." Lisa nodded, scribbling down a few notes. "Got it. And you want to know about his business dealings, too." "Especially that. I want to know if there's something I can use to my advantage." Lisa raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "All right, I'll get started right away. It'll take a couple of days, but I'll keep you updated." "Thanks," I said, feeling a small sense of relief. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was taking control of my life. Over the next week, I focused on settling into my new routine. I spent time in the apartment, reorganizing everything. I started picking up small freelance work, trying to make enough to cover the bills. The money from Greg's cards wasn't going to last forever, but it was a start. I had been so dependent on him for so long, but now, I was doing things on my own. However, the silence wasn't just unsettling. It was starting to feel personal. The longer Greg ignored me, the more I wondered what was going on in his head. Was he pretending that I didn't exist? Had he already moved on with someone else? I didn't want to know the answers, but I was afraid that deep down, I already did. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. I stared at the caller ID, seeing the familiar number flash across the screen. "Greg," I froze. My heart thudded in my chest, and for a moment I almost let it go to voicemail, but I knew I had to take it. If I was going to win this battle, I couldn't back down from the hard conversations. I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Hello, Sarah." Greg's voice came through, low and calm. He sounded completely different than he had during our last encounter. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound anything at all. "Greg," I said, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you want?" "I think we need to talk," he said. The words, cold, measured. "I'm not sure this is the best way for things to end." I couldn't help myself. A small laugh escaped me. "Oh, I think this is exactly how it should end." He didn't respond right away. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, and it sent a chill down my spine. I knew he was plotting something, trying to figure out what I was doing. "I want to talk about the house," he finally said, the words almost mechanical. "What about it?" I asked, my mind racing. "I'm not asking for it back," he said. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can resolve things. Maybe you could come back just for a few days until we work this out. The audacity, the gall. After everything, he thought I would just waltz back into his life like nothing had happened. No, I said firmly. You kicked me out. Greg, you don't get to tell me when and where I come back. There was another pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. Okay, then, he said, the calm returning. We'll handle it legally. The finality in his tone struck me hard. It was like a door slamming shut. We'll see about that, I replied, before hanging up. Later that day, I met with Lisa again. She had the information I needed. I dug into Greg's business accounts, and there's definitely something off, Lisa said, handing me a thick folder. He's been making large withdrawals, but they're all going into accounts I can't trace. And there's a lot of money tied up in offshore accounts. I stared at the papers in front of me, the gears in my mind turning. He's hiding something, I said softly. Exactly. And if I'm right, it could be more than just personal finances. It could be a way to keep you from getting your fair share. I felt a spark of anger flare up inside me. I'm not going to let him get away with it. Lisa smiled. You're not alone in this. I'll help you fight back. The days after my conversation with Greg felt like they were dragging on forever. He'd gone silent again, probably trying to figure out what to do next. But I was more determined than ever. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative anymore. The more I dug into his life, the more it became clear he thought he had the upper hand. But he was underestimating me. Lisa had been working tirelessly to track down every lead. I'd given her full access to the information I had, the bank cards, his financial records, even the personal details of his business dealings that I'd managed to uncover through his emails and texts. We were closing in on something, but I wasn't sure what yet. Then, just as I was about to lose hope that something big would break, Lisa called me with the news I'd been waiting for. I found something, she said, her voice crisp with excitement. It's not a lot, but it's a start. You were right, Greg has been hiding money, but not just in the offshore accounts. There's a safe deposit box under his name that he's been paying fees on for the last 2 years. I leaned forward in my chair, gripping the phone tight. A safe deposit box. What's in it? Lisa's voice dropped to a whisper. That's what we need to find out. The bank's records show he's been going there regularly, but here's the kicker. He paid for the box with an account that's linked to an alias, not even his real name. My mind spun with possibilities. So, he's been hiding something so valuable that he couldn't even use his own name. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. I'm going to dig deeper into the account, see if I can get access to it. But I thought you should know the fact that he's using an alias tells me it's something he doesn't want anyone to find out about. I felt a thrill rush through me. This was it. This was the breakthrough I needed. I need that box opened, I said, my voice trembling with anticipation. Whatever is in it, whatever it is he's been hiding, it's mine now. I'll handle it, Lisa assured me. I've got the bank details. Give me a day or two to get everything lined up, and I'll find out exactly what's in that box. The next few days were a mixture of anticipation and frustration. I spent most of my time in the apartment, trying to stay busy. I didn't want Greg to know what I was up to, didn't want to give him a reason to come after me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching, waiting. Then, on the third day after Lisa's call, I got the news. It's worse than I thought, Lisa said, sounding more serious than I'd ever heard her. Greg has an entire set of documents, contracts, assets, and, get this, a second property. My heart skipped a beat. A second property? Well, it's a house in the mountains. He's been paying for it, under the alias. But here's the real kicker. It's not just the property, it's an investment. He's been laundering money through it, using it as a front. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Money laundering? Are you serious? Dead serious, Lisa confirmed. This isn't just about hiding money, it's about covering up illegal activities. Greg's been pulling in extra income, and it's all been kept off the books. He's been using this second property as a way to funnel money through different accounts. I felt sick to my stomach. I had no idea that Greg had been involved in something so criminal. All these years, I had thought he was just a workaholic businessman, but this it was so much worse than I ever could have imagined. Okay, I said, finally regaining my composure. I need you to get me everything. The addresses, the contracts, the names, whatever's in that box. I want to know everything about this second property, and I want it now. Lisa didn't hesitate. I'm on it. I'll get it all for you. The next few days dragged on even longer, and I could barely focus on anything else. I couldn't stop thinking about the house, the money, the power that Greg had been hiding from me all these years. It made me sick, but it also made me determined. If I could uncover the full extent of his deception, I could make him pay for everything he'd done. Then, just as I was starting to lose hope again, Lisa called me with a breakthrough. "I've got the full set of documents," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "I've sent you a file. Everything you need is in there. The house, the contracts, even the people he's been working with. It's all in black and white." I opened my laptop, my heart pounding as I clicked on the file. There, in front of me, was the full extent of Greg's betrayal. The second property wasn't just a mountain house. It was a luxury estate, complete with a private lake and acres of land. And it wasn't just a personal investment, it was the linchpin of an entire criminal operation. Greg had been laundering money through it, covering up illegal sales and transactions. There was a name attached to the property, one that I recognized. The real estate agent was someone I'd met at one of Greg's business functions a few years ago. Her name was Amanda Green. But the biggest shock came when I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There, in bold letters, was an address that made my stomach churn. The very same address of the house I'd once called home, that Greg had been using the house we shared as collateral in a series of shady transactions. The thought made me feel dizzy. How could I have been so blind? "Greg's been keeping me in the dark for so long," I muttered to myself, staring at the screen. "It's time for him to face the consequences. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not now. Not ever." The walls were closing in, and I knew that Greg wouldn't be able to keep up the charade for much longer. The truth was coming out, and it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every piece of the puzzle was finally in place. I had the evidence, the documents, the bank cards. I had everything that would prove Greg's betrayal. I had been careful, meticulous. I had worked with Lisa to cover all my bases. No stone had been left unturned. The plan was simple. I was going to confront Greg, not in the way he expected, not with anger or tears. No, I was going to confront him with the truth, the hard, undeniable truth that would ruin everything he had worked for. His investments, his money laundering schemes, his second property, the lies he'd been feeding me for years, everything. He thought I was powerless, but I had the power now. Lisa and I had crafted the perfect strategy. I'd catch Greg off guard, and when he least expected it, I'd show him the extent of his mistakes. But I had no idea just how far Greg was willing to go to protect his secrets. It all started on a Wednesday afternoon. I received a call from Greg's lawyer. It was brief, almost too calm. "Mrs. Jenkins," the lawyer said, his voice as dry as dust, "we've arranged a meeting. Greg would like to discuss a settlement." A settlement? I felt a rush of frustration. He thought he could buy me off. After everything he'd done to me, now he wanted to settle. "Tell Greg to go to hell," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I'm not interested in a settlement." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then the lawyer spoke again, his tone sharpening. "You'll want to reconsider, Mrs. Jenkins. We've found something we think you'll be very interested in." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Just come to the meeting. Tomorrow at noon." The line went dead. I didn't need to ask what it was. I knew. He was going to try to turn the tables. He knew about the documents I'd uncovered. He must have found out somehow. Greg wasn't stupid. If he had any inkling that I had the upper hand, he would have moved quickly to cover his tracks. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. The game had changed. It was no longer just about getting revenge. It was about survival. I had no idea what Greg was planning, but I knew it wouldn't be pretty. The meeting was scheduled for noon the next day, at Greg's lawyer's office. I arrived early, my stomach a tangle of nerves. I hadn't anticipated this Greg trying to outsmart me, but I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let him manipulate the situation again.
When I walked into the office, Greg was already there. He was sitting at the large, polished oak table, his arms crossed, wearing that same smug expression he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. But this time, I could see the cracks. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something darker. He was on edge, like a man who knew he was about to lose everything. "Sarah," he said, his voice as cold as ice. "I see you've come. I was hoping we could resolve this, amicably." I didn't sit down. I stood there, staring at him, the weight of everything I'd uncovered pressing on my shoulders. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I don't want a settlement, Greg, I said, my voice steady. I want justice. Greg's eyes flickered with something like fear, but he quickly masked it. Justice? What are you talking about? I reached into my purse and pulled out the file. The one with all the documents, everything. I placed it on the table between us, watching as Greg's eyes darted to it. His face went pale. What is this? He asked, his voice suddenly tight. This, I said slowly, is everything. The money laundering scheme. The second property. The offshore accounts. Everything you've been hiding from me, and from the law. Greg's eyes widened, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw him sweat. You don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his voice losing its usual arrogance. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice cold now. You've been lying to me for years, Greg. And now, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I could see his mind racing. He was trying to think of a way to spin it, to explain it all away. But the evidence was irrefutable. You're not going to get away with this, I continued. I've already contacted the authorities. I've sent them all the documents. Your little empire is going to come crashing down. Greg's face contorted in anger. You think you've won, don't you? You think this is going to destroy me? I leaned forward, my eyes locking with his. No, Greg. You destroyed yourself the moment you thought you could get away with it. This isn't about me. It's about what you've done. And now, it's over. He slammed his fist on the table, making the papers jump. You can't do this. You don't have the power to ruin me. I smiled, a cold, calculated smile. I don't need the power, Greg. I just need the truth. And the truth is, you're done. For a moment, there was silence. It wasn't a victory lap, it was just the quiet before the storm. Greg looked at me, and I could see the realization dawn in his eyes. He had no way out. But just when I thought he was finished, Greg made his move. He stood up abruptly, knocking the chair back with a crash. His eyes were wild, desperate. You think you can destroy me with this? You don't know what you're getting yourself into. I took a step back, sensing the shift in the room. Greg wasn't going to go down without a fight. And I realized, for the first time, that I had underestimated how far he would go to protect his secrets. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, white envelope. You think you have it all figured out, Sarah? You don't know everything. There's one thing you're missing. He handed me the envelope, his eyes full of something dark and unspoken. I tore it open, my hands trembling as I pulled out the contents. It was a letter. A letter from Greg's lawyer, detailing a trust. A trust that would erase everything I'd uncovered. And just like that, the tables turned. The letter in my hands felt like a cold weight, its reality sinking in faster than I could process it. I stared at it, trying to understand what Greg's lawyer had crafted so carefully. The trust, this legal document, was something I hadn't expected. I took a deep breath, fighting the rush of panic that threatened to overwhelm me. Greg's lawyer had created a smokescreen. It seemed like the perfect out for him, a final fail-safe that would allow him to claim all the assets, circumventing everything I had uncovered. The trust was set up in such a way that it would shield Greg from losing control of his finances. It was a well-crafted trap, and for a moment, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Greg smirked, sensing my hesitation. You didn't think I'd leave myself vulnerable, did you? This trust is ironclad. You can't touch any of my assets now. It's over, Sarah. I looked at him, trying to read his face, but something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to let him play me one last time. He had underestimated me before, and now, he had made the ultimate mistake. You're wrong, Greg, I said quietly, my voice full of purpose. You think this trust is going to save you? It's just another lie. Greg's eyes narrowed, his smile slowly fading. What are you talking about? I lifted the envelope higher, making sure he saw the familiar letterhead at the top of the page. "This letter isn't from your lawyer. It's from mine. And it says that the trust you set up was fraudulent. You never declared the offshore assets, and you never made the necessary disclosures. The IRS is already investigating." For the first time, Greg's facade cracked. He went pale, his breathing becoming shallow. You're lying." "No," I said, standing up straight. "I'm not lying. Your lawyer, your own lawyer, has been feeding me information. He turned on you, Greg. I'm not the only one who knows what you've been doing. Your fraudulent schemes, your criminal activities, they're about to come to light." I paused, watching him absorb the shock. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back before he could touch it. "Everything you've worked for is about to fall apart. The money you've been hiding in offshore accounts? It's been traced. The house in the mountains? It's under investigation. The second property? It's about to be seized as part of the federal inquiry." Greg's mouth opened, but no words came out. He was cornered now, and there was no way out. But I wasn't done. "You thought you could control everything, Greg," I continued, my voice growing colder, sharper. "You thought I was the weak one. But all I needed was the truth. And now, you're going to lose it all." Greg took a step forward, his hands trembling with rage. "You think this is over?" he spat. "I still have money. I still have power. You can't take that away." I met his gaze, my heart steady now. "You have nothing left. Not anymore. You used me for years. You lied to me. You humiliated me. But now, you're the one who's going to be humiliated." There was a long silence. The weight of everything we'd both been through hung in the air. I could see Greg struggling with the reality of it all, fighting against the crushing weight of his own mistakes. But there was no denying it now. His world was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "I'm done, Greg," I said, my voice firm. "You can't hide behind your money anymore. You can't hide behind your lies. This is where it ends." For a moment, Greg stood there, staring at me as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Then, slowly, he sank back into the chair, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his defeat settled over him. A week later, the media frenzy began. The investigation into Greg's offshore accounts, his money laundering schemes, and his fraudulent trust took over the news cycle. The once touted businessman was now a criminal, his empire reduced to rubble. I watched from a distance, detached but oddly satisfied. The court proceedings were underway, and Greg was facing charges of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The properties he had been hiding? Seized by the authorities. The second home in the mountains? It was put up for auction. But the best part? Greg's own arrogance had been his downfall. His refusal to negotiate, his overconfidence in the trust, had only served to strengthen my case. He had left the door open, and I had walked right through it. I had already filed for divorce, and the assets we shared, what little was left, were being divided. But beyond the money, beyond the legal battles, the most important thing was the feeling of freedom I had finally reclaimed. Greg's hold over me had been shattered, and I was no longer just a shadow in his life. A few months later, I walked into a new chapter of my life. The apartment I had moved into felt more like home now. I had a new job, a new circle of friends, and a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. I was no longer defined by Greg, no longer controlled by his lies. I was free. One evening, I received a call from Lisa. She was no longer Greg's lawyer, but she had become a close ally throughout everything. "You did it, Sarah," Lisa said, her voice warm. "You really did it. The investigation is wrapping up, and they're offering you a settlement for the assets they've seized. You're going to get a fair share." I smiled, a weight lifting off my chest. "Thank you, Lisa. You've been my rock through all of this." As I hung up the phone, I looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I had lost so much, but I had gained something far more valuable: control over my own life. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out before me, wide open. And for the first time in years, I was free to make my own decisions, to choose my own path. No one could take that away from me. Author's note: in stories like these, the journey of empowerment often begins with taking small, decisive actions. Sarah's path to reclaiming control wasn't easy, but her resolve to confront the truth led to the downfall of a man who thought he was untouchable. The story demonstrates the value of resilience and justice, even when those who wronged you believe they can hide behind their lies. Ultimately, Sarah's victory wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming her voice and her future.